Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of GeoPod. I'm your host, Dylan Woods. And on this episode, we're going to discuss the recent developments within the geopolitical sphere. Now, there are a couple topics that I want to touch on today. First is the Iranian withdrawal from negotiations with the United States of America within the Middle East. Second is the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, where I want to provide you with some context pertaining to Israeli operations within that specific theater. And last but not least, I want to talk about the recent drone strike targeting Romania and some of the things that, some of the lessons rather, that NATO and Europe as in general need to take from that, and some of the things that they need to apply in order to uphold the deterrence going forward. So without further ado, let's stick right into it. So Iran withdrew on the 1st of June from any and all negotiations with the United States of America. Now that as in no way, shape or form comes as a surprise to me. Why doesn't it come as a surprise to me? Because, well, first and foremost, there was nothing to gain from these negotiations. And I've said this ever since from the get-go, ever since the beginning, at the start of these talks. Iran will refuse to compromise on the key points upholding a major agreement between the West and Iran. Why? Because by forfeiting those elements, their entire deterrent structure will crumble, as well as their long-term expansionist and radical objectives. So, what were the major points that Iran refused to forfeit on, or refused to compromise? First and foremost, the handing over of their highly enriched uranium stockpiles. Secondly, the forfeiting of their control over the Strait of Hormuz, which at this particular moment in time serves as their greatest deterrent, right? And last but not least, forfeiting the expansionism of their ballistic missile programs and their nuclear program. Now, all of these 4 points were clear before negotiations started. It was clear, based upon the rhetoric of the Islamic Republic, that there will be no concessions pertaining to these points. And I've said it before and I've said it again. This round of talks served but one purpose, at least from Iran's perspective. And that was time. Time to rebuild, time to recover, time to reconstitute its missile units and its missile stockpiles to make themselves a harder target going into the future. And at least partially, they've succeeded in that endeavor, not least due to the efforts of Russia, China, and North Korea, who have helped them dramatically in that regard. So how did we come here? Well, you've heard me talk about this conflict for a while now, so I'm not going to reiterate and repeat all the things that I've said before. Watch my previous clips, watch my previous breakdowns if you want to know my thoughts on those, on the many elements surrounding this particular conflict. Well, in short, how did we get here is because Donald Trump failed to commit to this conflict. I think that's the best way to put it. He failed to commit. And why did he fail to commit? Well, first of all, he had a very unrealistic prospect or outlook on this conflict, or rather what it would bring about. He wholeheartedly believed that through mere military action alone, albeit limited military action, right? Because let's be honest, it was an air campaign. It was not a full-scale invasion. No ground troops were involved. It was not even a full naval operation in many regards. It was mostly an air operation. That through a limited air operation, for a limited air campaign, the Iranians would rise up in support of his campaign and would take out the regime for them. Now, I've previously said on this channel why merely through an air campaign, that just simply wasn't going to happen, right? That's the first thing he expected to occur, which did not occur, obviously. The second thing he expected to occur was, okay, at least if there will not be an uprising, then my air campaign will be successful enough that it will force the Iranians to compromise on those key points that I've just mentioned. Again, it's not the case. Why? Because Iran, first and foremost, Iran is led by hardliners, radical hardliners, who would rather see their own populations die, starve and suffer than compromise in any way, shape or form to an entity that they deem to be the great Satan, the great evil, right? The United States of America. You do not negotiate with a country, or rather, a country doesn't do justice, a regime, rather, a terrorist regime that has death to America and death to Israel as its main go-to foreign policy. There's no negotiating with such an entity, especially if you yourself constitute that great Satan, that great evil that they're supposedly fighting against, right? So Trump is now left with a problem, and that problem is what to do next. For one, he can continue to enforce a blockade on Iranian ports and on Iranian cargo, which will prove very detrimental to Iran's economy. However, Iran can adapt, is adapting as of this particular moment in time, at the very least to increase the lifeline of their economy. So in that regard, and it might be successful, Iranian economy might be collapsing, but even then, it will not guarantee a regime change. So there's a lot of ifs, would, should, and coulds surrounding that specific tactic. The United States can choose to resume armed conflict with Iran, which will come at a cost. Already, United States munition stockpiles, at least most of the strategic ones pertaining to Tomahawk missiles and Patriot air interceptors, have been growing thin, especially after the latest round of fighting. So that will come at a cost. And at this particular moment in time, the United States Defense Industrial Base cannot replenish those stockpiles at the rate that is required in order for the United States to remain a reliable security guarantor for its allies across the globe. So you're treading very dangerous waters here, right? And once again, if you have planned this military campaign better, if you've expanded it across various frameworks, across various theaters, not just through the air, but also through on the ground, not necessarily with boots on the ground, but through localized militias backed up by united opposition front. And once again, I've said all of this before, watch my previous clips if you want to hear my thoughts and strategies about that. So this constituted the field of planning. And then when you had the enemy on the back foot, when their missile stockpiles were running low, when their launch sites were either destroyed or buried, where the defense industrial base was collapsing, you stopped and you entered negotiations where there was no strategic ground for any fruitful negotiations. So you've shot yourself in the foot, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And now Donald Trump finds itself in a reality that, well, pretty much everything that he does will come at a cost. A cost that to a certain extent is detrimental to the United States of America and its interests abroad. Now, what you want to do is you want to pick the one that will prove to be least detrimental. But any way, shape or form, the United States is gonna feel the weight of its mistake and failures pertaining to this conflict. Let me get one thing straight before we go over to the next subject. Or rather, let me use this as a bridge to the next subject. I see a lot of narratives going around online that the Iranians withdrew from negotiating with the United States due to Israelis' ongoing operations within the south of Lebanon. False. Nothing could be further from the truth. From the get-go, it was clear that the Lebanese theater would not be included within any concrete framework, concrete diplomatic agreements between the United States of America and Iran. False. The reasons why Iran withdrew, because Iran, or rather the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, deems it to be better for it to be no agreement between the United States and Iran, whilst Iran still continues to enjoy control over some of its key pillars pertaining to their deterrence, which is of course the control of the Strait of Hormuz, which is the reconstitution of its ballistic missile program, and which is the possession of its highly enriched uranium stockpiles. That is the reason, nothing else. And Iran is not going to compromise on these specific topics, or on these specific key points rather. Brings us to my next topic of today, which is the ongoing war between Israel and Hezbollah. Now, Israel has expanded its operations within the south of Lebanon and wants to expand its operations to such an extent that it will include all of Lebanon as well, or rather Hezbollah strong points, Hezbollah logistical networks, Hezbollah storages, Hezbollah's headquarters and operational command centers across the entire country. Why? Because Israel's facing a dire threat in the south right now, and that is Hezbollah's use of first-person view fiber optic drones, which has proven to be quite problematic for them. As of this point in time, Israel does not have a clear-cut answer for Hezbollah's use of FPV drones. And I've done a whole strategy breakdown pertaining to this particular topic. Once again, go watch that back if you want to hear my opinions of it in a little bit more detail, let's say. So what Israel wants to do now is it wants to come after Hezbollah's defensive base, defense industrial base. It wants to come after manufacturing sites. It wants to come after its logistical networks, its economic networks, its supply chains, right? It wants to take out the roots, to destroy the roots, to cut the roots out of the problem, all right? So that Hezbollah's usage of first-person view drones will not become as much of a problem in the mid and long term as it is right now. Obviously, when degrading Hezbollah's operational capacity in this regard, it will give the IDF, or rather the Israeli defense industrial industry, time to implement and integrate air defense systems specifically designed to counter drones, such as the Iron Beam system, which is currently being produced en masse for future deployments, right? It's not readily available now for every Israeli division, every Israeli unit, every Israeli brigade. So Israel wants to cut off the head of the snake, right? And that's the main reason why Israel wants to expand its operations. It understands that, yes, fine, we can control the south of Lebanon, but if Hezbollah is going to continue to harass our forces with FPV drones, which they manufacture north of the Litani River, which they can continue to keep manufacturing through the logistical networks, through the resources, through the economical networks, most of which are located across the country, but heavily allocated within Beirut, or in suburbs thereof, then our control over south of Lebanon will always be contested, right? And Israel's main objective within their campaigns in south of Lebanon is to create a security buffer zone so that Hezbollah can no longer effectively target northern Israeli communities, right? Now, I've heard a lot of other stuff going around pertaining to the Israeli-Hezbollah conflict, in particularly the utilization of a tactic known as bulldozing, known as flatlining. Right, and this is a tactic that Israel has employed en masse within the Gaza Strip. It's very graphic: the destruction of buildings, houses, destruction of what is sometimes deemed to be or allegedly civilian infrastructure. Let me give you a little bit of context here from a military and security perspective. What I'm hearing left and right is this, right? Israel is flatlining southern Lebanese towns because it wants to create settlements there. It wants the Jews to settle. It wants to take over south of Lebanon. It wants to include south of Lebanon as part of the Greater Israel Project. First of all, as of this particular moment in time, there are no concrete plans for Israeli settlements to be built upon Lebanese territory whatsoever. We must remember one thing. For months now, there have been ongoing negotiations between Israel and the Lebanese government, right? So not Hezbollah, the Lebanese government. Both of these entities have come to the same conclusion. Hezbollah is a problem that threatens the sovereignty of both our nations respectively. Okay? The Lebanese government has agreed with the disarmament of Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, as any armed group rather, within Lebanese political, economical or military frameworks. So the objective for both nations is the same. Here lies the problem. The Lebanese armed forces are not capable of disarming Hezbollah on their own. Why? Because for decades now Hezbollah has been the most powerful party within Lebanese government, societal and military frameworks. So you need help from the outside in order to get this done. If you go back to the past, on numerous occasions, the United States, Israel have tried to present the opportunity to the Lebanese armed forces to disarm Hezbollah on their own, and it all failed dramatically. Why? Because they simply do not have the capacity of doing so, and because their decision-making bodies are heavily infiltrated by Hezbollah members, or at the very least parties loyal or sympathetic towards Hezbollah, or rather its cause. So that isn't going to work. So you need a party that can disarm Hezbollah effectively. Only way to disarm is through armed conflict. And that's what Israel is doing right now. So why is Israel targeting, or bulldozing rather, these buildings, these houses, these towns, these villages, these settlements? Well, I can tell you the military reason behind them. So we must remember this. Israel has fought numerous campaigns against terrorist organizations, Hamas, Hezbollah. There's the country, there's the military on the face of this earth as of this moment in time, who is as experienced in modern and asymmetrical urban warfare as the IDF is. Everything they're applying, every tactic that they apply, that they utilize, that they integrate in their overall strategy, in their overall modus operandi, comes from years and years and years of hard-earned lessons. Okay? Historically and statistically, the greatest threat that both Hamas and Hezbollah has posed to IDF, to Israeli troops on the ground, are ambushes, sharpshooting positions, and the utilization of IEDs allocated within or in close proximity to civilian infrastructure. So Israel has two options in order to counter that, right? We can send our troops in, putting our troops in significant more risk. We can use continuous airstrikes, which, sure, might destroy launch site, but will not fully guarantee the complete neutralization of that specific building as a military threat or a strategic, tactical, operational threat to us, and will cost, obviously, a significant amount of ammunition, which will also come at a price. Third option, we'll take it down, we neutralize and eliminate the defensive obstacles favored by our opposition in order to prevent our opposition to relying on the same tactics and strategies and methods that they've applied against us for decades and decades on end. And that's what the Israelis are doing right now. You have to understand one thing. As a military, it is my duty, my responsibility to mitigate, first and foremost, to mitigate threats towards my own troops. That's my highest priority. Everything else is secondary. And let me also explain to you how this translates to international law, or rather the Geneva Conventions. Yes, civilian infrastructure should be safeguarded against all military strikes. But what constitutes civilian infrastructure? What is the differentiation between a civilian target and a military target? Simple. It's utilization for military purposes. Meaning that if a building, house, town, village is utilized, whether on small scale or a large scale, for military purposes, meaning it shelters enemy combatants, it's used as a storage for weapon systems, it's used as a launch site, it's used as a strategic position to launch ambushes off, it is used as a position for the placement of IEDs, then that specific building, that specific asset, is no longer part of civilian infrastructure. It's now a military target. Why? Because it's being utilized for military purposes. And that's exactly what Hamas knows, what Hezbollah knows, and what they've done for decades, right? Utilizing civilian infrastructure to mask their operations, to provide them with some level of plausible deniability, to put political and societal pressure on Israel, as well as remain in the position to damage Israeli troops or inflict casualties on the Israelis the first extent possible. And that's the main reason from a military and security point of view why Israel is bulldozing these buildings and these houses, because they were used in many instances, rather in part or as a collective, by Hezbollah. Hezbollah has enjoyed a large foothold within southern Lebanon. This is in no way, shape or form a surprise. This is in no way, shape or form a secret. The greatest strongholds of Hezbollah were the towns and settlements that Israel currently occupies within the south of Lebanon. And that's the reason why they went about this particular tactic, because it safeguards their soldiers to the furthest extent possible, saving precious ammunitions, and they can guarantee, at the very least to the fullest extent possible, that that specific obstacle, that specific position utilized or utilizable by enemy forces is no longer there. And this plays right into the modus operandi of Hezbollah and Hamas, who adhere to the use of ambushes, sharpshooting positions, the heavy use of IEDs within buildings, within houses, within civilian infrastructure, as well as their adherence to an intricate system of tunnel warfare, tunnels that run directly beneath civilian infrastructure, making it very hard to neutralize these networks without impacting civilian infrastructure, at the very least to some extent. For the record, do I want to see Israeli settlements within the south of Lebanon? I do not. Do I want to see the same as that I do not want to see Israeli settlements within the West Bank, or within Sinai, or within Syria? Do I want to see a greater Israel that encompasses significant masses of territory beyond Israel's respective borders? No, I do not. But I do think it's important to provide some military and security context to the tactics that Israel is currently employing within the south of Lebanon. Now, let me get to my last topic of the day, because it's starting to become quite a long video and I don't want to take any more of your time. Romania was recently hit by a Russian drone, struck an apartment building, inflicting 2 casualties. Obviously, this stands as a very dramatic escalation in the tensions between Europe and Russia, who has persistently infiltrated European airspace with drones, violated international law, sabotaged, divided, manipulated, pretty much to their liking, without any repercussions whatsoever. Multiple times before on this channel, I've reiterated the need for stronger deterrence against these campaigns of shadow and hybrid warfare that Russia currently employs against Europe. And unfortunately, once again, now that we are talking about a legitimate strike from Russia on a European nation, on a European NATO member, I might add, all that we've gotten in return was condemnation and rhetoric. Now, why is this such a bad thing? Because it sabotages your deterrence posture in general. What it shows Russia, and what we have shown Russia over the course of the past couple of years, is that Russia can infiltrate our airspace, sabotage our airports, sabotage demersal cables, energy networks, on the sea level, shoot drones, violate airspaces, and now strike civilian infrastructure within European nations without any repercussion whatsoever. What that tells Russia is, oh, you can get away with this, so why not do it again? Actors and entities such as Russia, such as Putin and the people he surrounds himself with, understand the notion of power. They respect the notion of power. It's the only language they truly know by heart. And them getting away with this, more or less, shows them that they can do this, that they can continue to do this without repercussions, without any strategical negatives, whether it be militarily, politically, or economically, whatsoever. Europe and NATO, to a larger extent, must understand that deterrence is not built by rhetoric. Deterrence needs to be, at one point, enforced. A NATO member has been attacked. NATO needs to answer that attack. Otherwise, its deterrence will crumble and is but an illusion conjured up by naive and feeble minds who, in my opinion, have no place within modern geopolitics. Now, do I advise NATO to en masse 40, 50,000 troops and march to Russian borders? No, I do not. Do I believe that NATO needs to answer? Yes, I do. Once again, previously on this channel, I've done multiple videos where I laid out my strategies on how to bolster NATO's deterrence and how to respond to these kinds of incidents. Now, I will say this particular incident, in my opinion, is a more dire escalation because civilian infrastructure was struck. This isn't simply an incursion into another nation's airspace, degrading or sabotaging or violating someone's sovereignty or airspace in general. No, this was a strike that inflicted casualties. Now you need to respond to that strike with similar means. What I would like to see, for once, okay, a drone was launched, a drone struck an apartment building. Where was that drone launched from? That position? Then we strike that position, whether through fighter jets or through drones ourselves. And then we can leave it at that. Would that initiate tit-for-tat exchange between Russia and Europe? Perhaps, to a certain extent. Albeit a very small one. Why? Because Russia desperately needs its ammunition and its military focus to be on Ukraine, where they're losing the momentum right now. So I do not believe that it in any way, shape or form will escalate, or rather dramatically escalate tensions between Russia and NATO. If anything, I think it will bring a little bit more balance, and it will allow NATO's deterrent posture to hold up. Deterrence is only effective if it holds any merit, if it's enforceable. And if you fail to enforce, you might as well not have it, because it's an illusion. And what Russia is doing right now through its the warfare campaign is not just bullying, it's mapping out It's testing. How far can we go? What are the vulnerabilities? How will NATO respond if we do A, B, C, or D? And you cannot allow that to happen persistently without any repercussions, militarily. Not just economically, not just politically, not just rhetorically. It must be enforced. This is all I want to share with you today. If you have any comments for me, any questions for me, any topics or subjects that you would like me to discuss next, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. You can also reach out to me to one of my social media platforms, and I aim to get back at you as swiftly as possible. I thank you very much for taking the time to watch this clip, and I wish you all a blessed day. Thank you. Bye.